I was folding laundry when he walked in with a smirk I hadn't seen before, cocky, cruel. The warm April afternoon streamed through our suburban Chicago windows, catching the dust motes floating in the air. Daniel's footsteps sounded different that day. Heavier. Deliberate. I'd been matching Jacob's soccer socks when I felt the shift in the room's energy. Sarah. My name from his lips had never sounded so hollow. I looked up, a half-folded t-shirt in my hands, to see him standing there in his expensive charcoal suit, the one I'd picked out during the Nordstrom anniversary sale last summer. His dark hair was freshly cut, his cologne unfamiliar. Something cold settled in my stomach. "We need to talk," he said, loosening his tie with manicured fingers. 18 years of marriage had taught me his tells. The way his left eye twitched slightly when he was about to drop something unpleasant. The way he squared his shoulders before delivering bad news to a client. But this was different. This was practiced. Rehearsed. About? I kept folding. Routine as shield. He leaned against our kitchen island, the one we'd argued about for months before installation. Too expensive, he'd said. Worth it, I'd insisted. I'd won that battle. One of the few. I'm leaving you, Sarah. No preamble. No hesitation. I'm running away with my secretary, Jennifer. He said her name with such tenderness it made me flinch. My lawyer friend said you have no rights, ha ha ha. The laugh wasn't nervous, it was triumphant. I froze. The t-shirt slipped from my fingers. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was a sick joke or a nervous breakdown. The room seemed to tilt. 18 years of marriage, 3 kids, a mortgage, and a lifetime of sacrifices all came crashing down with just a few words. What about the kids? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They'll understand eventually. Emma's off to college soon anyway. Jacob and Lily, they'll adjust. He shrugged as if discussing a minor inconvenience rather than destroying our family. I've already moved most of my things. Been doing it gradually. You never noticed. Of course I'd noticed. The missing cufflinks. The emptier closet. The disappearing framed photos. I'd noticed but refused to see. Classic Sarah, avoiding conflict until it was unavoidable. When? It was all I could manage. Does it matter? He dropped his house keys on the kitchen counter with a metallic finality. I'm 39, Sarah. Too young to settle for this. He gestured vaguely around our home, the handmade quilts from my mother, the children's artwork framed on walls, the family photos documenting vacations and milestones. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was the arrogance. The way he dismissed our life like it was a joke, like I was a placeholder until something better came along. He didn't even pack a bag. Just walked out, confident that I'd crumble, that I'd beg, that I'd break. The mortgage payment is due on the 1st, I said quietly. The insurance premium on the 15th. Confusion flickered across his face. He'd expected tears, hysterics, not logistics. Did you hear what I said, Sarah? I'm leaving. It's over. I nodded slowly. I heard you. He stood there for a moment, clearly disappointed by my reaction. Jennifer understands me. She supports my ambitions. She's excited about my future. And I wasn't? You were. Comfortable. Safe. He said it like an accusation. I need more. When the front door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because something inside me had ignited. The house, suddenly emptier, felt oddly liberating. The silence, deafening but clarifying. I walked to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and stared at myself in the full-length mirror. 42 years old. Laugh lines around my eyes. Hair I hadn't colored in months. Clothes chosen for comfort rather than style. But behind the soft exterior was steel he'd never recognized. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. You think I'm weak? Watch me. I opened the window and breathed in the spring air. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. A neighbor's dog barked. Life continued. And so would I. That night, I didn't call my sister. I didn't reach out to friends. I sat on our patio, my patio, with a glass of the expensive Cabernet he'd been saving for a special occasion. The stars above Chicago's suburbs seemed brighter somehow. Or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time in years. Tomorrow would bring pain. Questions from the children. Whispers from neighbors. Pitying glances from friends. But tonight, I allowed myself this moment of strange, terrible freedom. The freedom that comes when someone shows you exactly who they are, and in doing so, reminds you who you used to be. Before I met Daniel, I was Sarah Mitchell, a rising star in finance with a master's degree from Northwestern and offers from top firms in Chicago and New York. My office overlooked Lake Michigan. My business card had weight. My opinions mattered in boardrooms where women were still novelties. I worked 80-hour weeks and thrived on the adrenaline of closing deals and outthinking competitors. I met Daniel at a charity gala in downtown Chicago. He wasn't the most handsome man there, but his confidence was magnetic. A junior attorney with ambition burning in his eyes. We talked about economic theory and Supreme Court decisions. He asked questions and actually listened to my answers. A rarity in my dating life at that point. Our courtship was whirlwind fast and city sleek. Dinners at Alinea, weekend getaways to Michigan's wine country, ambitious plans whispered over morning coffee. We were equals then. Partners plotting a shared future of success and significance. When Emma came along, unplanned but immediately adored, we faced the question that haunts every dual-career couple: who stays, who goes? We discussed it like the rational professionals we were. Spreadsheets. Pros and cons. 5-year projections. Your career has more growth potential, I told him, logical even through postpartum exhaustion. Mine has a ceiling I'm already approaching. That was the story we told others. The practical decision. The math made sense. But underneath was a simpler truth. I fell in love with Emma's tiny fingers and midnight cries in a way that surprised me. I wanted those moments. All of them. It's just a pause, Daniel assured me as I packed up my office. A few years at most. My boss, Catherine, childless by choice and ruthlessly successful, pulled me aside on my last day. You'll never get back in at this level, she warned, concern in her usually steely eyes. The market doesn't reward maternal sabbaticals. I smiled, confident in my decision. Watch me. 1 child became 2, then 3. Jacob arrived 2 years after Emma, and Lily was our surprise caboose 5 years later. The temporary break from my career stretched into permanence. I channeled my analytical mind into family finances, optimizing our investments and managing the household with the same precision I once applied to corporate acquisitions. I became room mom, PDA treasurer, den mother. I helped with science projects and coached debate teams. I maintained the family calendar with military precision and remembered every appointment, every allergy, every preference. I became the invisible infrastructure of our family success. Daniel's career flourished. Partner by 35. Mentions in Chicago Legal Monthly. Speaking engagements. I edited his presentations, proofread his briefs, hosted dinner parties for his colleagues. I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. You're so lucky, his colleagues' wives would tell me at firm events, cocktails in hand. Not having to work. Having all this freedom. I'd smile and nod, never mentioning the complex tax strategies I'd implemented that morning or the retirement portfolio I'd rebalanced during Lily's piano lesson. Never mentioning that not working was the hardest work I'd ever done. Daniel never asked about my career. Never wondered what I'd given up. He'd introduce me at parties as Sarah, my wife. She takes care of our home. As if I existed only in relation to him and his needs. As if my previous identity had evaporated the moment I became a mother. Over time, I stopped mentioning my past accomplishments. Stopped correcting people when they assumed I'd always been just a mom. It was easier that way. Less complicated. I tucked away my ambitions like winter clothes in summer. Not discarded, just stored. Waiting. I watched other women fight to balance careers and motherhood, coming home exhausted to second shifts of domestic labor. I told myself I'd chosen the more honest path. The more present path. But some nights, after the children were asleep and Daniel was working late, with Jennifer, I now realized, I'd sit in our darkened kitchen and wonder, who would I have been if I'd stayed? The night Daniel left, I pulled out my old laptop from the back of the closet, dusted it off. The charger took some finding, buried in a box of outdated electronics. The battery was dead, but after 30 minutes of charging, the familiar startup sound made my heart race. My password from a lifetime ago still worked. My files were organized with the same meticulous structure I'd once applied to everything. Financial models, market analyses, presentation decks that had once impressed boardrooms full of men in expensive suits. I found my old resume and nearly laughed out loud. This confident woman with impressive credentials, who was she? Where had she gone? Had I really been that person once? I opened a browser and typed in the names of former colleagues. Catherine was now CEO of the firm where we'd both worked. Michael had started his own investment company. Jennifer, a different Jennifer, my friend and mentor, had retired early after making partner at Goldman. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant but determined. I opened my email account, amazingly still active, and composed a new message to Jennifer. "It's been too long," I wrote. "I find myself at an unexpected crossroads. Could we meet for coffee?" I hit send before I could overthink it. My brain lit up like it had been waiting for this moment. The world had changed in 18 years, but I hadn't lost my sharpness. And I was ready to use it. When I finally went to bed that night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because I wasn't afraid, I was terrified. But because for the first time in almost 2 decades, I felt like Sarah Mitchell again. Not just Daniel's wife. Not just Emma, Jacob, and Lily's mom. But Sarah. A woman with her own story, her own ambitions. A woman who was about to remind the world and herself of what she was capable of. Jennifer, my Jennifer, not his, met me at a quiet cafe in Evanston, far from Daniel's usual haunts. She looked exactly as successful as her LinkedIn profile suggested. Crisp white button-down, understated jewelry, the confident posture of a woman who had never stepped away from her power. "Sarah Mitchell," she said, rising to hug me. "Still gorgeous after all these years." I almost corrected her, "It's Sarah Cooper now," but stopped myself. Mitchell. My name. Mine. Over artisanal coffee and pastries neither of us touched, I told her everything. The betrayal. The secretary. The smirk. The keys dropped on the counter. "What a cliché," she scoffed. "The midlife crisis affair with a secretary? Next, he'll buy a sports car." "Already has one," I said. "Red Porsche. Last year's Christmas gift to himself." She laughed, then turned serious. "What do you need, Sarah?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Direction? Advice? A time machine?" Jennifer set down her cup with purpose. "No time machines necessary. You've got something better." At my questioning look, she continued, "You've got the element of surprise. He thinks you're just a housewife with no direction, no ambition. That was his biggest mistake. I haven't worked in 18 years. You haven't collected a paycheck in 18 years, she corrected. But you've been working, managing a household, raising 3 humans, handling finances, organizing lives." She leaned forward. "Tell me about your investments." And so I did. Told her about the careful portfolio diversification, the college funds, the retirement accounts, the life insurance policies, the trust fund Daniel's parents had established for our children, the property we owned in Michigan, a vacation home rarely used but steadily appreciating. Jennifer listened, nodding occasionally, her expression shifting from curiosity to respect to something like delight. "He has no idea, does he?" she finally asked. "No clue who he's dealing with." I shook my head. "He thinks I just sign where he tells me to sign. But you read everything first. Every word. Every clause. Every footnote." Her smile was slow and satisfied. "Then here's what we do next." She gave me a name, Marissa Cabrera, a divorce attorney with a reputation for destroying men who underestimated women. "She's not cheap," Jennifer warned. "But she's worth every penny." I nodded, making a note in my phone. "Money isn't an issue." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Emergency fund?" "Let's just say I've been preparing for rainy days since before I met Daniel." I hadn't planned for divorce specifically, but financial independence had been ingrained in me by my practical Midwestern parents long before I'd ever fallen in love. Smart woman. Jennifer signaled for the check. One more thing. Don't let him see you coming. Let him underestimate you. It's your greatest advantage. 2 days later, I sat across from Marissa Cabrera in her downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a Chicago skyline I'd once been part of. Her desk was glass and chrome. No family photos. No personal touches. Just competence and confidence. So, she said after I'd summarized my situation, "He thinks you have no rights." That's what he said. Based on advice from his friend, college buddy who practices corporate law. She made a dismissive sound. "And you've been married how long?" 18 years. Children? 3. 17, 15, and 10. You've been the primary caregiver? Yes. While he built his career with your support? Yes. She made a few notes, then looked up at me, dark eyes sharp. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, Mrs. Cooper. Do you know what that means? That marital assets are divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Correct. And since you've been married nearly 2 decades, with you enabling his career growth while sacrificing your own, fairly tends to lean in your favor. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. Has he moved out officially? Yes. 3 days ago. And the children? Still at home with me. He hasn't even called them. My voice tightened despite my efforts to remain clinical. Has he cut off financial support? Not yet. But I'm sure it's coming. Marissa nodded, as if confirming a theory. Here's what happens next. We file first. We document everything, assets, debts, his abandonment, the affair if we can prove it. We request temporary orders for child support and maintenance. We freeze joint accounts before he can empty them. She leaned forward. But most importantly, we let him believe he's winning, right until he isn't. I started quietly after that. Methodical, strategic. While Daniel was setting up his bachelor pad with Jennifer the secretary, I was preparing for war. First came the documentation. I spent hours photographing every valuable item in our home, cataloging artwork, jewelry, collectibles, downloading bank statements, investment reports, tax returns, finding policies buried in filing cabinets and digital folders. I created spreadsheets tracking household expenses, children's needs, projected costs. Next came the legal groundwork. Marissa filed for temporary orders, child support, spousal maintenance, exclusive use of the family home. We froze joint accounts before Daniel could drain them. We changed the passwords on our family cloud storage, photo sharing accounts, and subscription services. Small things, but each one a thread in the safety net I was weaving. Then came the hardest part, talking to the children. Emma, perceptive and protective, had already guessed much of it. "He's with that woman from his office, isn't he?" she asked the night I finally sat them down. "The one who kept calling during dinner?" Jacob retreated into stoic silence, retreating to his room to blast music that vibrated the walls. Lily cried, confused and heartbroken, asking questions I couldn't fully answer. Does Daddy not love us anymore? Did I do something wrong? I held them, reassured them, promised them stability in the midst of chaos. And then, when they were asleep, I returned to my planning, my strategizing, my quiet, methodical dismantling of Daniel's comfortable assumptions. For 6 weeks, I maintained a facade of stunned compliance. When Daniel called with demands, I listened without argument. When he complained about needing access to funds, I murmured sympathetic noises. When he stopped by to collect more belongings, I was cordial, almost meek. Let him think I was defeated. Let him enjoy his little fantasy life with his secretary while I lined up the dominoes. One by one. Quietly. Ruthlessly. "You're too nice to him," Emma observed after one such visit, her teenager's eyes missing nothing. I smiled at my daughter, so much smarter than I'd been at her age. "I'm not being nice," I told her. "I'm being strategic." She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly, a new respect in her eyes. "Like chess. Exactly like chess." I kissed her forehead. And in chess, you don't show your opponent your plan until it's too late for them to stop it. The first hearing was scheduled for July 15th. Daniel didn't know it yet, but his summer was about to get very, very complicated. July in Chicago is always a special kind of furnace, humid, unforgiving, the air thick enough to chew. The heatwave that summer seemed particularly fitting as Daniel's carefully constructed new life began to melt away. The first hit came on a Tuesday morning. I was making blueberry pancakes, Lily's favorite, when my phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. It's done. Simple words for a complex maneuver. Overnight, our joint accounts had been frozen. Not emptied, I wasn't vindictive enough to leave him with nothing, just legally paused. Temporary orders had been filed. The documents had been delivered to his office. I poured more batter onto the griddle, watching perfect circles form and bubble. Waiting. It took exactly 17 minutes for my phone to explode with his rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice was strangled, unfamiliar. I can't access MY money. Our money, I corrected softly, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. Marital assets. The judge thought it best to preserve the status quo until our hearing. Judge? What judge? Are you actually taking me to court? The disbelief in his voice would have been comical if it wasn't so infuriating. Did he truly believe I would just roll over and accept whatever scraps he deigned to throw me? Daniel, you left your family. What did you expect would happen? I expected you to be reasonable. My lawyer friend said, your lawyer friend, I interrupted, should stick to corporate contracts. Family law is quite different. The silence on the other end was spectacular. You have no right, he finally sputtered. You're just a what, Daniel? Steel entered my voice as I turned off the stove. A housewife? A woman you can dismiss? Think carefully before you finish that sentence. He hung up. I served pancakes to the children, answered their questions about the tense call as honestly as age-appropriate boundaries allowed, and sent them off to summer activities. Then I sat at our kitchen island, my kitchen island, and allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. The next blow came 2 days later, a comprehensive financial discovery request from Marissa to Daniel's hastily hired actual divorce attorney. Every account, every investment, every business interest, every hidden asset. His new lawyer, competent but overworked, called mine. This is excessive, he complained. This is thorough, Marissa corrected. And entirely standard for a marriage of this duration with substantial assets. What Daniel hadn't counted on, what his secretary-turned-girlfriend certainly hadn't anticipated, was how quickly his comfortable life would become complicated. The temporary support order meant his disposable income shrunk dramatically. The frozen accounts meant his credit cards were suddenly his only lifeline. The mandatory parenting schedule meant he had actual responsibilities to his children, responsibilities Jennifer hadn't signed up for. Dad canceled again, Jacob announced one Thursday evening, tossing his overnight bag onto the couch. His face was carefully arranged into teenage indifference, but I caught the hurt beneath. I'm sorry, honey. He shrugged. Said he has to work late. But Emma saw him and Jennifer at Millennium Park yesterday when she was there with friends. Said they were looking at apartments. I nodded, filing away this information. Marissa would want to know about the pattern of canceled visitations. How about pizza tonight? You can pick the toppings. By August, the cracks in Daniel's fairy tale had become chasms. Jennifer, it seemed, was growing tired of playing second fiddle to a messy divorce. Their social media posts, once a digital scrapbook of their perfect new love, became less frequent, their smiles more strained. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways that surprised even me. I'd reconnected with former colleagues, started a financial consulting side business that quickly gained clients, joined a support group for divorced and divorcing women. I repainted our bedroom, donated Daniel's remaining clothes to charity, and planted a vegetable garden with Lily. The forensic accountant Marissa hired found what we suspected, accounts I hadn't known about. Investments hidden during our marriage. A pattern of financial infidelity that had preceded the physical kind. There's a lake house in Wisconsin, the accountant reported during a meeting in Marissa's office. Purchased 3 years ago through an LLC. Miss Cooper's name doesn't appear on any of the documents. I remembered those weekends Daniel had claimed to be at legal conferences. The unexplained expenses. The sunburn he couldn't quite explain in April. Anything else? Marissa asked, taking meticulous notes. Offshore accounts. Nothing massive, but certainly deliberate. And a concerning pattern of cash withdrawals over the past 18 months. Roughly $80,000 unaccounted for. I thought of Jennifer's new designer wardrobe, the European vacation they'd taken while Daniel claimed to be working on a big case. Pieces clicking into horrible, clarifying place. Well, Marissa said with the smile of a predator who's spotted wounded prey, this certainly changes our strategy. Daniel's lawyer called the next day, suddenly eager to discuss settlement terms. Too late. The more we uncovered, the less inclined I felt toward mercy. The unraveling accelerated when Daniel's firm began an internal investigation. Anonymous tips had reached the managing partners about potential financial improprieties. Daniel wasn't just facing a divorce, he was facing professional ruin. He showed up at the house unannounced one evening in September, reeking of whiskey and desperation. The children were at my sister's for the weekend, and I was enjoying the rare solitude with a book and a bath when the doorbell rang repeatedly. "You've destroyed everything," he slurred when I opened the door, keeping the security chain in place. "Are you happy now?" "You destroyed everything when you walked out that door," I replied calmly. "I'm just making sure the children and I survive it." "Go home, Daniel. You're drunk." "Home." He laughed bitterly. "Jennifer kicked me out last week. Said this wasn't what she signed up for." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but pushed it aside. "That's not my problem. Sarah, please." His voice broke, and for a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd once loved. Vulnerable. Real. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. 5 months ago, those words might have moved me. Might have cracked my resolve. But I wasn't the same woman he'd left folding laundry in April. I was someone stronger. Someone who remembered her worth. "Yes, I agreed. You did. And now you get to live with the consequences. Goodbye, Daniel." I closed the door on his protests, my hands steady, my heart curiously light. In the bathroom, I slipped back into my cooling bath, picked up my book, and continued reading. The woman in the mirror, flushed from the steam, eyes clear and determined, smiled back at me. Not with cruelty. Not with vengeance. But with the quiet certainty that justice was unfolding exactly as it should. Court date, November 12th. The first real frost of Chicago winter had arrived overnight, silver-coating the grass and turning my breath visible as I walked from the parking garage to the Cook County Courthouse. I wore a navy suit I'd bought 2 weeks earlier, not to impress Daniel, but to remind myself of the woman I had always been. Professional. Poised. Powerful. Nervous? Marissa asked as we waited outside courtroom 302, our breath mingling in the chilly hallway. The heating system in this part of the building was notoriously unreliable. Oddly, no. I adjusted the simple pearl necklace at my throat, the same one I'd worn on our wedding day. Not out of sentiment, but as a symbol. A reminder that I walked into that marriage with strength, and I was walking out with even more. Marissa smiled, the sharp, satisfied smile of someone who knew we held all the cards. "Remember what we discussed. Let him talk himself into trouble. Men like Daniel can't resist performing." We'd prepared extensively. Reviewed financial documents. Practiced potential questions. Anticipated Daniel's tactics. But nothing quite prepared me for the jolt of seeing him after weeks of carefully maintained distance. He looked diminished somehow. Designer suit hanging slightly loose, dark circles under eyes that wouldn't meet mine. Jennifer was notably absent. His new attorney, his third since the proceedings began, looked harried and underprepared, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to his client. Judge Patricia Reynolds presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for seeing through theatrics. She'd reviewed our filings thoroughly, her questions incisive and specific. "Mr. Cooper," she addressed Daniel directly after preliminary matters were handled, "I'm troubled by these financial disclosures. Or rather, the lack thereof. Can you explain why you failed to report the Lake Geneva property? Daniel straightened, summoning the charm that had once dazzled juries. Your Honor, that property was purchased as a business investment through my LLC. I didn't consider it a personal asset. An LLC for which you are the sole proprietor, Judge Reynolds noted, peering over her reading glasses. A property you used personally, according to witness statements. A property purchased with funds from joint marital accounts. His attorney jumped in. Your Honor, my client maintains that those funds were earned through his independent legal work and therefore separate property. Judge Reynolds didn't look convinced. Separate property commingled with marital assets for 18 years becomes marital property, counselor. First-year law students know this. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Beside me, Marissa made a small note on her legal pad, her face professionally blank. As the hearing progressed, Daniel tried every tactic. He painted me as unstable, as vindictive. He minimized his affair, framing it as a relationship that began only after the marriage was already failing. He suggested that my financial consulting work proved I didn't need support. She's always been capable of working, he insisted. She chose not to. That's not my responsibility. Marissa rose slowly. Your Honor, may I respond to that characterization? With the judge's nod, she proceeded to systematically dismantle Daniel's narrative. She presented evidence of my career sacrifices. Testimonials from the children's teachers about my involvement in their education. Documentation of how my support had enabled Daniel's career advancement. Mrs. Cooper didn't choose not to work, she concluded. She chose to work without compensation to advance the family's collective interests. Interests that Mr. Cooper has now abandoned, along with his responsibilities. When my turn came to testify, I felt a surprising calm. The courtroom, with its scarred wooden benches and fluorescent lighting, should have been intimidating. Instead, it felt like a stage I'd been preparing to stand on my entire life. Mrs. Cooper, my attorney began, could you describe for the court how decisions about your career and family responsibilities were made? I spoke clearly, maintaining eye contact with the judge rather than Daniel. I explained our early conversations. The spreadsheets. The rational choice that became an 18-year commitment. I detailed my contributions, financial management, property oversight, children's education, networking support. I outlined my recent steps toward rebuilding my career. And these offshore accounts discovered during financial discovery, Marissa continued. Were you aware of them during your marriage? No, I answered truthfully. I knew about our joint investments, our retirement accounts, our children's college funds. Those I monitored closely. But these accounts? I shook my head. Those were deliberately hidden from me. Daniel's attorney objected, claiming speculation. The judge overruled. When cross-examination came, Daniel's attorney tried to portray me as a gold digger now seeking revenge. Isn't it true that you're demanding these assets out of spite, Mrs. Cooper? That you're trying to punish my client for ending a marriage that had grown stale? I met his gaze steadily. No. I'm seeking equitable distribution of assets that we built together over 18 years. I'm seeking security for our children. And I'm seeking recognition of my contributions, both seen and unseen. And the lake house you didn't know existed? He pressed. You're entitled to that as well? According to Illinois law, yes. Assets acquired during marriage with marital funds are subject to equitable distribution, regardless of whose name appears on the deed. According to my husband, I have no rights. According to the law, I have many. A flicker of surprise crossed Daniel's face. He hadn't expected me to understand legal principles. Hadn't expected me to speak with authority. Hadn't expected me at all. By afternoon's end, Judge Reynolds had heard enough. She ruled from the bench rather than taking the matter under advisement, unusual but telling. Based on the evidence presented, she began, I'm granting temporary exclusive possession of the marital home to Mrs. Cooper, along with primary physical custody of the minor children. Mr. Cooper will maintain his visitation schedule as previously established, assuming he begins to actually exercise it. Daniel flinched at the pointed remark. As to support, she continued, Mr. Cooper will pay both child support and maintenance according to statutory guidelines, effective immediately. The Lake Geneva property is hereby considered a marital asset subject to division in the final decree. She fixed Daniel with a stern look. Additionally, I'm ordering a complete forensic accounting of all accounts, including those offshore holdings. Mr. Cooper, I strongly suggest full compliance and transparency going forward. This court takes a dim view of financial concealment. When we left the courtroom, reporters from the Chicago legal press hovered nearby. Daniel's firm was prominent enough to make this newsworthy. Marissa shielded me skillfully, guiding me through a service corridor to avoid them. "We won," I whispered, the reality slowly sinking in. "Round 1, she corrected. But it was decisive. His attorney will be calling to discuss settlement terms before the week is out. In the parking garage, I spotted Daniel standing alone by his car, head bowed. For a moment, I felt an echo of the love I'd once carried so carefully. Not enough to forget. Certainly not enough to forgive. Just enough to recognize the human wreckage of his own making. He looked up as I approached my car, our eyes meeting across the concrete expanse. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In that moment of silent acknowledgement, power shifted permanently. Not because I had destroyed him, though perhaps I could have, but because I had refused to be destroyed. I drove home through the gathering darkness, streetlights flickering on across the city. The house was warm when I arrived, lights on in welcome. Emma had picked up her siblings from school and started dinner, her famous spaghetti carbonara, a celebration meal in our family. "How did it go?" she asked, wise beyond her 17 years. I hung my coat carefully, smoothed my hair, and smiled at my children gathered in our kitchen. Our home. Our future. It went exactly as it needed to. 2 years pass quickly when you're rebuilding a life. The seasons turn, children grow inches taller, and seemingly permanent wounds become faded scars, still visible but no longer painful to touch. Spring in Chicago always feels like a small miracle after the brutal winter. This particular April morning, I sat on our back deck with coffee, watching early sunlight filter through budding maple trees. Lily, now 12, was practicing soccer moves in the dewy grass, her determination visible in every pivot and turn. The divorce had hit her hardest initially, but children are remarkably resilient when given stability and honesty. "Mom," she called, noticing me watching. "Did you see that crossover?" "Impressive," I answered truthfully. "Coach Kim will be thrilled with your progress." She beamed, returning to her drills with renewed vigor. Inside, I could hear Jacob's music, less angry these days, more contemplative, drifting from his bedroom. At 17, he'd recovered his equilibrium after the family earthquake, channeling his emotions into competitive swimming and surprisingly good poetry that he occasionally allowed me to read. Emma was home from Northwestern for the weekend, sleeping in after a late night catching up with high school friends. Her freshman year had been challenging but successful, pre-law, following neither of her parents' advice, but her own stubborn heart. "I want to help people navigate disaster," she'd explained when announcing her major choice. "Like Marissa did for us." I smiled at the memory, sipping my coffee and reviewing the day's schedule on my phone. Client meeting at 11. Lunch with Jennifer, my Jennifer, at 1. Picking up Lily from soccer practice at 4. Ordinary moments that felt extraordinary after the chaos we'd survived. The divorce had been finalized 14 months earlier, the settlement more favorable than even Marissa had initially hoped. Daniel's hidden assets had ultimately been his undoing. The judge had been unimpressed with his attempts at financial sleight of hand. I received the family home, primary custody, substantial support, and a significant portion of our investment portfolio. But I hadn't wanted just to survive, I wanted to thrive. My financial consulting business had grown from a few clients to a steady roster of women navigating major life transitions, divorce, widowhood, retirement, career changes. I'd found my niche, translating financial complexity into actionable simplicity, providing the education and empowerment I'd once craved myself. 3 days a week, I worked from a small but elegant office downtown, watching the same Lake Michigan views I'd enjoyed in my 20s. The other two, I worked from home, available when my children returned from school. Balance, elusive but essential. I declined alimony in the final settlement, though I could have demanded it. Not out of pride, though there was some satisfaction in refusing Daniel's money, but because I wanted clean breaks and new beginnings. The child support and my growing business provided well enough, and more importantly, gave me something money couldn't buy: independence. My phone chimed with a text from Emma. "Breakfast? Starving. We'll cook." I smiled and texted back, "Kitchen's all yours. Wake your brother." Life in our house was quieter now, but full of peace. We'd established new traditions to replace those that had expired with the marriage. Sunday morning brunches, monthly movie marathons, summer camping trips to Michigan, a Christmas Eve package delivery to the children's hospital where Lily had once had her tonsils removed. Daniel. The name no longer triggered an emotional avalanche. He was simply someone I used to know intimately who had become nearly a stranger. Our communication was brief, practical, mostly about the children. He'd moved to Milwaukee after his Chicago firm asked him to resign, not officially connected to our divorce, but the timing wasn't coincidental. His affair with Jennifer, the secretary, had ended shortly after the preliminary hearing, a surprise to no one except perhaps Daniel himself. Last I heard, he was dating someone new, living in a rented apartment, and fighting with his latest girlfriend. I didn't keep tabs on him, but news found its way to me. Jacob mentioned occasional uncomfortable dinners. Emma reported strained holiday visits. Lily still drew him in family pictures, but positioned him far from the rest of us, her unintentional symbolism too accurate to misinterpret. I didn't gloat over his struggles. There's no satisfaction in watching someone you once loved self-destruct. But I didn't mourn for him either. His choices, his consequences. My energy was reserved for those who had remained faithful, who had weathered the storm with me. "Mom?" Emma appeared on the deck, wrapped in her old high school sweatshirt, hair piled messily atop her head. Earth to Mom. I blinked, returning from my thoughts. "Sorry, honey. Just reflecting. Happily, I hope." She settled into the chair beside me, pulling her knees to her chest like she used to as a little girl. "You had that faraway look. Just appreciating how far we've come." I reached over to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. 2 years ago today, actually. Her eyes widened with realization. The day Dad left. I didn't even connect the date. "That's good," I said, meaning it. Dates lose their power eventually. She studied me with her perceptive gaze. "Are you okay? Really okay? Not just Mom okay?" The question deserved honesty. I am. Not perfect. Not finished becoming whatever I'm going to be. But genuinely okay. Emma nodded, satisfied. "You know what Professor Levine said in ethics yesterday? That sometimes we don't know our own strength until being strong is the only choice we have." She stretched, yawning. "Made me think of you." My throat tightened unexpectedly. "That's quite a compliment." "Just truth." She stood, squeezing my shoulder. "Pancakes or waffles?" Jacob requested chocolate chips either way. "Surprise me," I replied, watching her disappear inside, her confidence a gift I hadn't expected from our family's fracturing. People always say revenge is sweet. But honestly, it's not the revenge that feels good. It's the clarity, the strength, the knowledge that I survived and I won. Not because I destroyed him, but because I rebuilt me. I finished my coffee and stood, mentally reviewing my client notes for the morning meeting. Mrs. Peterson, recently widowed after 40 years of marriage, navigating finances alone for the first time. Mr. Jacobson, planning retirement and worried about supporting his adult daughter with special needs. Ms. Williams, a young professional establishing investment strategies early in her career. Each of them facing transitions, uncertainties, fears. Each needing what I'd once needed, guidance through choppy waters towards safer shores. Inside, the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the kitchen. Jacob had emerged, hair still wet from his shower, debating with Emma about the optimal chocolate chip-to-batter ratio. Lily had abandoned her. Soccer drills for the more immediate appeal of breakfast, setting the table without being asked. I paused in the doorway, Watching them, these resilient, magnificent humans who had weathered a storm not of their making. We weren't a broken family. We were a different family. Stronger for having been tested. Wiser for having been wounded. "Mom, settle this," Jacob called, noticing me. "Chocolate chips inside the pancakes or on top?" "Both," I answered, joining them at the island. "Why limit yourself?" Emma laughed. "Very philosophical, Mom." I shrugged, stealing a chocolate chip from the bowl. "Just practical. Sometimes the answer isn't either or. Sometimes it's both and." As I helped mix batter and flip pancakes, joining the comfortable banter of my children, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom or the settlement. It wasn't in reclaiming my career or my confidence, though both were precious. The victory was in this ordinary Saturday morning. In chocolate chip debates and soccer practices. In college visits and poetry notebooks. In the family that remained, remade but not diminished. The victory was in becoming a woman my children could admire, not despite their father's betrayal, but because of how I responded to it. Not a victim but a navigator. Not defeated but determined. Not bitter but better. Later, driving downtown for my client meeting, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman who gazed back had laugh lines around her eyes and a streak of premature silver in her dark hair, battle scars from a war I hadn't chosen but had ultimately won. She looked like someone I was proud to have become. Someone who remembered who she was and turned betrayal into rebirth.